The night I became Victoria started like any other disaster in my life, with a man who didn't show up. I was sitting at the bar of Aurelius, one of those upscale cocktail lounges where the drinks cost $18, and the clientele looked like they had stepped out of a magazine. I didn't belong here. I knew I didn't belong here. My dress was from a clearance rack, my shoes were pinching my feet, and I had exactly $47 in my bank account, 30 of which were about to go toward the overpriced martini. I was stress drinking. But Derek had suggested this place. Derek, my supposed date. The guy I had matched with on a dating app 3 weeks ago and spent hours texting. Derek, who had promised to meet me here at 8 o'clock, and who was now, according to my phone, 45 minutes late with no explanation. I should have left. I should have walked out of that pretentious bar with its mood lighting and its beautiful people and gone home to my apartment, where I could eat ice cream in my pajamas and pretend I hadn't just been stood up for the 3rd time this month. But something kept me glued to that bar stool. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the martini. Maybe it was the tiny, pathetic part of me that kept hoping Derek would walk through that door and have a really good excuse, like a flat tire or a family emergency or temporary amnesia. He didn't walk through the door. Someone else did. I noticed him immediately, the way everyone in the bar noticed him. He was tall, over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his gray suit like it had been sewn specifically for his body, which it probably had been. His hair was dark, slightly tousled in a way that looked effortless, but probably took significant effort. His face was all sharp angles and aristocratic bones, the kind of face that belonged on billboards or in boardrooms or anywhere that required looking devastatingly handsome. He paused just inside the entrance, scanning the room with purpose, looking for someone. His eyes swept past the clusters of beautiful people, past the couples nestled in velvet booths, past the groups of friends laughing over cocktails. They moved methodically across the space until they landed on me, sitting alone at the bar in my clearance rack dress, nursing my overpriced martini, looking exactly like what I was, a woman who had been stood up and was too stubborn to admit defeat. And then he smiled. It was the kind of smile that did things to people, the kind of smile that made rational women forget their own names, and sensible men question their life choices. It transformed his face from intimidatingly handsome to approachably gorgeous, and it was aimed directly at me. He walked toward me with the confidence of a man who had never been rejected in his life. Each step was purposeful, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world and intended to spend it in my presence. My heart started hammering against my ribs. This wasn't happening. Men who looked like that didn't approach women who looked like me. There had to be a mistake. He was probably looking at someone behind me, some gorgeous model type who was waiting for exactly this moment. I glanced over my shoulder. There was no one there. When I turned back, he was standing right in front of me, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive that made my head swim. "Victoria?" His voice was deep and warm, with a slight accent I couldn't quite place. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was absolutely brutal." My mouth opened. The word no formed somewhere in my brain, ready to be spoken, ready to correct this obvious case of mistaken identity. But then he smiled again, and he said, "You're even more beautiful than your photos. I was worried you might be too good to be true." And the word no just didn't come out. Maybe it was the loneliness. 45 minutes of sitting alone, feeling invisible, watching happy couples while I waited for a man who was never coming. Maybe it was the 3 weeks of texting Derek, building up hopes that had just come crashing down. Maybe it was the way this stranger looked at me. Really looked at me. Like I was someone worth crossing a room for. Or maybe I was just tired. Tired of being overlooked. Tired of being stood up. Tired of being the kind of woman that men swiped past without a second thought. Whatever it was, I heard myself say, "It's okay. I just got here myself." The lie came out so smoothly, it surprised me. Like I had been waiting my whole life to be someone else. And now I finally had the chance. He slid onto the bar stool beside me, close enough that our knees almost touched. "I'm Adrian. Adrian Castellanos. Though I suppose you already know that from the app." Adrian Castellanos. Even his name sounded expensive. "Of course," I said, even though I had never heard of him before this moment. "It's nice to finally meet you in person. The pleasure is entirely mine." He signaled the bartender with the ease of someone who is used to getting attention. "What are you drinking? Let me get you another." "Martini, dirty. A woman who knows what she wants." His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "I like that." The bartender appeared almost instantly. Funny how that worked when you looked like Adrian Castellanos. And he ordered my martini and something amber for himself without glancing at a menu. When the drinks arrived, he raised his glass to mine. "To blind dates," he said, "and to taking chances on strangers." I clinked my glass against his, trying to ignore the guilt already gnawing at my stomach. To taking chances. One drink, I told myself. I would have one drink with this beautiful man. Enjoy the novelty of being seen for once. And then I would make an excuse and leave. I would go home, delete my dating apps, and spend the rest of my weekend questioning my life choices like a normal person. That was the plan. The plan lasted approximately 15 minutes, because Adrian Castellanos was not just handsome. He was charming in a way that felt genuine rather than practiced. He asked questions and actually listened to my answers. He laughed at my jokes, even the bad ones, with what seemed like real amusement. He leaned in when I spoke, like every word out of my mouth was fascinating. He made me feel fascinating. "So tell me, Victoria," he said, about an hour and 2 drinks into our conversation. "What do you do when you're not captivating strangers in bars?" I froze. This was where the lie would unravel. Victoria, whoever she was, probably had a glamorous job to match her glamorous photos. She was probably a model, or a fashion designer, or a tech executive. She was probably someone impressive. I was a kindergarten teacher who lived in a studio apartment and couldn't afford to get her car fixed. "I work in education," I said carefully. It wasn't technically a lie, just a vague truth that Victoria might theoretically share. "A teacher." His expression shifted to something like admiration. "That's wonderful. I have enormous respect for educators. My mother was a teacher before she passed. She always said it was the most important job in the world." "I'm sorry about your mother. Thank you. It was a long time ago." He took a sip of his drink. "But I still think about her every day, especially when I meet people who remind me of her warmth." He was looking at me like I was warm, like I was good, like I was exactly the kind of person he had been hoping to find. The guilt intensified, but so did something else. Something dangerous. Something that felt suspiciously like hope. "Tell me about you," I said, desperate to shift the conversation away from the fictional Victoria. "What does Adrian Castellanos do when he's not being charming in bars?" He laughed. "I run a company. Real estate development, mostly. Hotels, residential communities, Commercial properties. It sounds more exciting than it is. Mostly I sit in meetings and sign documents. Real estate development. Hotels. This man wasn't just wealthy. He was wealthy. The kind of wealthy that existed in a completely different universe from kindergarten teachers with $47 in their bank accounts. That does sound like a lot of meetings, I managed. Too many. That's why I finally let my sister talk me into this blind date thing. He swirled his drink thoughtfully. She's been on my case for years about working too much, not making time for a personal life. She set up the profile for me, picked all the photos, even wrote the bio. I just had to show up and hope for the best. And is the best what you found? He looked at me with those dark eyes, and something electric passed between us. I think it might be. We closed down the bar that night, talked until the bartender started giving us pointed looks and wiping down the counter around us. When we finally stepped outside into the cool night air, I was dizzy with conversation and connection, and the increasingly desperate knowledge that I was in way over my head. I had a wonderful time tonight, Adrian said, standing close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Can I see you again? Say no. My brain screamed. End this now before it goes any further. Tell him the truth or walk away. But for the love of God, don't make this worse. I'd like that, my mouth said, apparently operating independently of my survival instincts. He smiled that devastating smile and leaned in. And before I could think or protest or do anything sensible, he was kissing me. Soft at first, then deeper, one hand cupping my face like I was something precious. When he pulled back, I couldn't remember my own name, either of them. I'll call you tomorrow, he said. We can plan something proper. Dinner, maybe. Somewhere I can show you off. Show me off? A beautiful woman like you? I want everyone to know how lucky I am. He kissed me again, lighter this time, then walked away toward a car that probably cost more than my apartment building. I stood on the sidewalk and watched him go, my lips still tingling, my heart still racing, my conscience screaming that I had just made a terrible mistake. One night, I had told myself, but as I walked home alone through streets that seemed somehow brighter than before, I knew with absolute certainty that one night was never going to be enough. The next few weeks were the most exhilarating and terrifying of my entire life. Adrian didn't just call. He texted constantly, good morning messages that made me smile, random thoughts throughout the day, good night wishes that made me feel like I mattered. He sent flowers to my work, which caused absolute chaos among my fellow teachers. He took me to restaurants I had only ever seen in magazines, to parties where people whose names I recognized as headlines mingled like it was nothing. And every single moment, I was pretending to be Victoria. I learned to deflect questions about my past, to change subjects when the conversation got too specific, to construct a version of Victoria that was close enough to me that I could keep the lies straight but glamorous enough that she belonged in Adrian's world. It was exhausting. It was intoxicating. It was slowly driving me insane. You're different from other women I've dated, Adrian told me one night, about 3 weeks into our relationship. We were lying on the couch in his penthouse, because of course he had a penthouse, watching the city lights twinkle through floor-to-ceiling windows. Different how? You're not impressed by any of this. He gestured vaguely at the opulent surroundings. The money, the lifestyle, the things I can buy. You look at all of it like it doesn't matter. Doesn't it? Not to you, I can tell." He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. "You like me for me, not for what I can give you. Do you have any idea how rare that is?" The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. He thought I wasn't impressed by his money because I was above such shallow concerns. The truth was that I was a kindergarten teacher who had been eating ramen 3 nights a week before he came along. I was the furthest thing from above anything, but he was right about one thing. I did like him for him. Somewhere beneath all the lies and the pretending, I had fallen for the man who remembered how I took my coffee and asked about my students and looked at me like I was the most interesting person he had ever met. I had fallen for Adrian Castellanos, and I was absolutely terrified. "I need to tell you something," I said one night, about 6 weeks in. We were having dinner at his place, a meal his private chef had prepared that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Adrian looked up from his wine, his expression open and trusting. "You can tell me anything." I took a deep breath. This was it. The moment of truth. I would confess everything. My real name, the mistaken identity, the weeks of deception. He would be hurt and angry, maybe furious, but at least it would be over. At least I could stop drowning in guilt. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I'm so sorry. I have to take this. It's my sister. She only calls when it's important." He stepped away, and I watched him pace across the room, speaking in rapid Spanish to whoever was on the other end. The moment passed. The confession died in my throat. When he came back, his expression was troubled. "Family emergency. I hate to cut dinner short, but go. Of course, family comes first." He kissed me quickly, gratefully, and promised to call later. And I sat alone in his penthouse, surrounded by evidence of a life I had no right to be part of, wondering how much longer I could keep this up before it all came crashing down. The answer, as it turned out, was 3 more weeks. The crash came on a Tuesday evening, at a charity gala Adrian had invited me to attend. I was wearing a dress he had bought me. Designer, gorgeous, worth more than everything in my closet combined. And I felt like a princess, like Cinderella at the ball, except Cinderella hadn't been committing identity fraud. We were mingling with donors and socialites, and people whose last names were on buildings. And I was actually starting to relax. I had gotten good at this. Good at being Victoria. Good at deflecting questions and changing subjects and pretending I belonged. And then I heard her voice. "Adrian Castellanos?" I turned, and my blood turned to ice. She was blonde, gorgeous, exactly like the photo I had glimpsed on Adrian's phone that first night. The photo of Victoria. The real Victoria. The woman he had actually been supposed to meet. She was walking toward us with a confused smile on her perfect face, and I knew with absolute certainty that my borrowed life was about to end. "I thought that was you," she said, reaching out to touch Adrian's arm with familiar ease. "God, it's been ages. How are you?" Adrian's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, Dewey. It's Victoria. Victoria Hartwell. We were supposed to have a date a couple months ago, but I had to cancel last minute. Family thing. I felt terrible about it. I've been meaning to reach out and reschedule, but you know how crazy life gets." The world slowed down. I watched Adrian's expression shift from confusion to realization, to something I couldn't read. Watched his eyes move from Victoria, the real Victoria, to me. "You cancelled," he said slowly. "The night we were supposed to meet at Aurelius." "Yes. God, I'm so sorry about that. My grandmother had a fall and I had to fly out to be with her." I completely forgot to message you until like 2 days later, and by then, I figured you'd already written me off as one of those flaky app people." She laughed, oblivious to the tension crackling between Adrian and me. "But hey, we should definitely try again sometime. If you're still single." Her eyes finally landed on me, on Adrian's arm around my waist, on the way we were standing together like a couple. Her smile faltered. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were here with someone. I didn't mean to." "It's fine," Adrian said, his voice strange and flat. "Victoria, this is—" He stopped, looked at me. "Actually, I don't think I ever asked your last name." The silence that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. "Her name isn't Victoria," real Victoria said slowly, looking between us with dawning understanding. "Is it?" I couldn't speak, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except stand there as the beautiful lie I had constructed fell apart around me. "Excuse us," Adrian said to Victoria, his voice polite but cold. "We need to have a conversation." He took my arm, not roughly, but firmly, and guided me out of the ballroom, through a service corridor, into an empty hallway where the noise of the gala faded to a distant hum. Then he let go of me and stepped back, and the look on his face broke my heart. "Tell me I'm wrong," he said. "Tell me there's some explanation. Tell me you're not who I think you are. Adrian, your name isn't Victoria. No, you weren't my blind date that night. No. Then who the hell are you?" The tears were streaming down my face now, ruining the expensive makeup I had so carefully applied. "My name is Sophie. Sophie Chen. I was at that bar because I got stood up by someone else, and when you walked in and thought I was Victoria, I couldn't. You couldn't tell me the truth? I was going to. That first night, I was going to correct you. But then you smiled at me like I was someone worth smiling at, and I hadn't felt that way in so long, and I just wanted one night. One night of feeling like I mattered. One night." His laugh was bitter. "It's been 9 weeks, Sophie. 9 weeks of dinners and parties and—" He stopped, his jaw tight. 9 weeks of me falling in love with someone who doesn't exist. I exist. Everything I told you about myself was true. My job, my family, my dreams. The only lie was the name. The only lie was letting me believe you were someone else. Letting me build something with you based on a foundation of deception." He shook his head slowly. "I told you things I've never told anyone. I trusted you. And this whole time, you were just... what? Playing a game? Seeing how long you could keep it going? No. God, no." I reached for him, and he stepped back like my touch would burn him. "I fell in love with you, Adrian. Really, genuinely fell in love. I tried to tell you the truth so many times, but I was scared. Scared you would hate me. Scared you would leave. Scared of losing the only real happiness I've ever known. So, you just kept lying instead. Yes, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He was quiet for a long moment, and I watched emotions war across his face. Hurt, anger, confusion, and something that might have been grief. Grief for the relationship he thought we had, for the Victoria who had never existed. "I need time," he finally said. I can't process this right now. I need you to leave. Adrian, please, leave Sophie. Before I say something I'll regret." I left. Walked out of that gala in my borrowed dress and my borrowed life, crying so hard I could barely see. Found a cab and gave the driver my address. My real address, the tiny studio apartment that suddenly felt even smaller than before. And I waited. The next 2 weeks were agony. Adrian didn't call, didn't text, didn't respond to any of my messages, which ranged from desperate apologies to rambling explanations, to simple please just talk to me please. I went to work and taught my kindergartners, and tried to pretend my heart wasn't shattered into a million pieces. I cried myself to sleep every night. I wrote letters I never sent and deleted texts I never received. I had gambled everything on a lie. And I had lost. The knock on my door came on a Sunday night. I wasn't expecting anyone. I was in my pajamas, eating ice cream directly from the container, watching a reality show that required zero emotional investment. When I opened the door and saw Adrian standing there, I nearly dropped the ice cream. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, clothes rumpled like he had slept in them. He was holding his phone in one hand, and on the screen was the photo. Victoria's photo, the one that had started everything. "I've spent 2 weeks trying to hate you," he said without preamble. 2 weeks telling myself that everything we had was fake, that you manipulated me, that I was an idiot for falling for it. Adrian, let me finish. He stepped inside without being invited, pacing my tiny apartment like a caged animal. I told myself I would get over you. Move on. Find someone real. Someone who wouldn't lie to me from the very first moment. I understand. No, you don't. He stopped pacing and turned to face me. Because here's the thing, Sophie. I can't get over you. I've tried. God, I've tried. But every time I close my eyes, I see your face. Not Victoria's. Yours. The way you laugh at your own jokes. The way you scrunch your nose when you're thinking. The way you look at me like I'm just a person, not a bank account or a business opportunity. I do see you that way. I always did. I know. That's what's killing me. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. You lied to me. For 9 weeks you let me believe a lie, and I should hate you for that. I should never want to see you again. But I'm standing in your apartment at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, because I can't stay away. Because apparently my heart didn't get the memo that we're supposed to be done. Hope flickered in my chest, fragile and terrifying. What are you saying? I'm saying I'm angry. I'm saying I don't know if I can trust you. I'm saying this is the most complicated situation I've ever been in, and I have no idea how to navigate it. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the vulnerability beneath the exhaustion. But I'm also saying that I love you, not Victoria. You, Sophie. The woman who was too scared to tell me the truth because she thought I wouldn't want her without the lie. I was so stupid. You were scared. I understand that now. He reached out and cupped my face in his hands, the same way he had that first night. I spent 2 weeks being angry, and then I spent 3 days thinking about what you said, about being stood up, about wanting to feel like you mattered, and I realized that we weren't that different. I was at that bar because I was lonely, too, because my sister made me a profile and I was desperate enough to try anything. So, where does that leave us? I don't know. Somewhere messy. Somewhere complicated. He rested his forehead against mine. Somewhere that starts with the truth and builds from there. Can you do that? Can you be honest with me, even when it's hard? Yes, I promise. No more lies. No more pretending to be someone I'm not. Then tell me your name, your real name, and let me fall in love with her properly this time. I smiled through my tears. Sophie Chen, 28 years old, kindergarten teacher. I live in a studio apartment, and I have $47 in my bank account, and I eat ramen 3 nights a week. I'm awkward and insecure, and I make terrible decisions when I'm lonely. Nice to meet you, Sophie Chen. He kissed my forehead gently. I'm Adrian Castellanos. I'm 32. I work too much, and I just spent the worst 2 weeks of my life missing a woman who doesn't even exist. She exists. She was just hiding. Then stop hiding. He pulled back to look at me. Let me see you, the real you, and let's figure out if what we have is strong enough to survive how it started. And if it isn't, then at least we'll know. At least we'll have tried. He smiled, that same devastating smile that had started everything. But I have a feeling it will be. Because I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you, Sophie Chen. Not Victoria. You. We didn't fix everything that night. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. There were hard conversations and setbacks, and moments when it seemed like the damage was too deep to repair. But we kept trying. We went on real dates. Dates where I used my real name and told real stories, and didn't have to remember which lies I had told. We fought about the deception, and made up and fought again. We built something new on the ashes of the lie. Something stronger, because it was honest. He proposed a year later, in the same bar where we had met. He reserved the same seats, ordered the same drinks, and got down on one knee, right there at Aurelius. I fell in love with you twice, he said. Once when you were Victoria, and again when you became Sophie. This time, I want to fall in love with you as my wife. Will you marry me? I said yes. We were married 6 months later in a small ceremony. His sister was there. The one who had created the dating profile, who had set up the blind date that never happened. She gave a speech about how sometimes the best things in life come from the strangest mistakes. My brother was supposed to meet Victoria that night, she said. But the universe had other plans. It gave him Sophie instead. And I've never seen him happier. That was 2 years ago. Now we have a house in the suburbs, and a dog named Chance, because we took a chance on each other. And a baby on the way. I still teach kindergarten, though Adrian keeps trying to convince me to let him fund my own school. I still eat ramen sometimes, though now it's by choice rather than necessity. And every year, on the anniversary of that first night, we go back to Aurelius. We sit at the same bar, order the same drinks, and remember how it all began. Do you ever regret it? I asked him last year, watching him across the rim of my martini glass. The way we met, all the complications. Not for a second. He reached across the bar and took my hand. The lie brought us together. The truth kept us together. And I wouldn't trade either one. He mistook me for his blind date, and I didn't correct him. It was the worst decision I ever made. And somehow, impossibly, it led to the best thing that ever happened to me. Some love stories start with truth. Ours started with a lie. But it ended with forever. And that's all that really matters.